Hey, a big hand sanitizing, soap and water, social distancing welcome to everybody out there listening today, sheltering in place because right now the world is in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic. We've officially gone from epidemic to pandemic. I guess they're saying that it is now centered in the European Union. That seems to be the new ground zero after moving out of Asia. And this thing appears to be spreading faster than some people actually expected. There are new surprises every single day. Here in my town, we went through what I guess most of you have been going through. First, all the toilet paper disappeared, and it's hard to understand why there'd be a run on toilet paper first for a viral disease, other than the fact that maybe people are thinking, can I stay in my home for 3 or 4 weeks and not run out to get things? I don't know. So the toilet paper disappears first. And then there's panic buying of Purell. Actually, guys, I think here in studio, we've always had like a gallon of Purell sitting by the studio door. It's probably worth, oh, there it is, the last gallon of Purell on the planet. It's probably worth like $2,000 right now. You sell it one squirt at a time, guys. And is that yours personally, Ruben, or is that ours?
No, but I'm happy to keep it safe for us.
Yeah, I think that should go in the vault now. That might be the most precious commodity in all of America right now. Look at that thing. There's a whole gallon of it.
We've got a really high-tech security system on it now. So
there you go. Alarm it. So the Purell disappeared. And then I thought, you know what's next? There's going to be a panic on groceries. That's what's coming next. And people laughed, but sure enough, my wife went to the grocery store the other day and they're sold out of almost everything. The funny part is, here's the funny part of it. All the meat was gone. All the beef was gone. All the chicken was gone. But apparently all the veggie meats like Beyond Burger and that stuff, there's mountains of that. Nobody's stocking up on Beyond Burger for the apocalypse. That stuff's still on the shelf. Then here in the state of Colorado recently, it depends on when you're listening to this, but recently the governor just shut down every restaurant in the state, and this thing's starting to snowball everywhere. And I guess, here we are, practice run for what might be a final crisis one day. And I used to make fun of the people who were stockpiling, but I found myself asking the same question. Look, I'm 50 years old. And I've noticed that they say, in the beginning, they were saying nobody under 50 has died of this thing. And I thought, why would you set the line at 50, right at my age? I guess I'm in the first sort of category that gets a little higher risk, and then higher at 60 and 70 and 80. That's where my father is, up in that category. And so I found myself thinking about this too. I've got a daughter who has asthma. We're asking, do we have enough inhalers? And what if she gets sick? So I find myself asking the same questions as everybody else. And then I went out and bought a few more groceries than I usually do too. Not a lot. I'm not a prepper. I'm not burying shipping containers in my backyard. That's not sort of how I'm wired, but I thought, well, what if I have to stay home for 3 weeks? Do I have enough of everything? So I know there's stuff going on in your life. Not the topic of the show today. We may get to that here in a little bit. Maybe one week we'll just talk about what this is doing to all of us. But my family's going through what your family's going through right now. My daughter is in college. They've canceled all classes, at least the in-person classes. She's going to have to go online and do that. And then they ordered everybody to move out of their dorms. My daughter wasn't in the dorm. She's in an apartment. But the college owns the department, so they've evicted her from that. She's got to be out here in a matter of hours. And so I've got a daughter on the other side of the country, and she has a job offer waiting for her, we hope, depending on what happens. She doesn't want to fly out this side of the country and come home just in case she can't get back for this job that's waiting for her. We don't know what to expect, and I know you don't know what to expect. My youngest daughter, she's supposed to graduate from high school in May, and we've got grandparents now wondering if they want to fly in for the commencement, the graduation ceremony, if there is a graduation ceremony. Here's one that's really breaking my heart. We have been running Bible prophecy seminars. I do one every year in a major city. And right now we've opened up, we've sort of spread the impact of that so we can hit more than one city at once. And I've got close to 200 of these things happening all across America. And the CDC first said no more than 250 people in a meeting. Then they said no more than 50. And recently it's down to 10, and basically breaks my heart. People were learning about the Bible. They were finding new relationships with Christ. And those are all shut down. We've had to shut that down across the nation. Breaks my heart. But here's where I am personally, just between you and me as the listeners to Disclosure. I'm not going to panic. I don't think Christians should panic. Psalm 91, if you want to do a little reading tonight and realize that you don't have to panic when God's on your side, that's amazing reading. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Here's verse 7. 1,000 may fall at your side and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Now, let me say this. That's probably talking about circumstances that are more dire than those that we are facing right now. I get that this is a new variant of the coronavirus, and I'm not a doctor. I'm not the CDC. This is just opinion and not necessarily fact, but this doesn't seem as serious to me as other crises could be. Who knows? Who knows where it's going to go? This may not be the most spectacular crisis humanity has ever faced. I mean, it doesn't look like the smallpox plague or any of that yet. But no matter what it is you're facing, no matter what your fear level is, you can dwell in the secret place of the Most High. You can abide under the shadow of the Almighty. Let me give you this as homework. I mean, you're locked up in your house anyway. Go blow the dust off that family Bible and look up Psalm 91. If you haven't cracked a Bible in many, many years or ever, you find it roughly in the middle of that Bible. Read those first few verses there. You don't have to panic. So here I am today, not panicking, being wise, preparing. You want to be wise. I'm practicing social isolation. We are here. We're following the recommendations. We all stay at least 6 feet apart from each other. I mean, I've always tried to stay 6 feet away from my staff. I just saw Joel shift in the control room away from Hareem. That's probably a smart move, Joel. Get as far away from Hareem as you can. We don't know what he's carrying. I mean, that's even on the best of days, even without a virus, right? So we're practicing social isolation. I have the crew together in a tiny isolation booth together running the show, and I'm by myself in a hermetically sealed studio. Here's a little aside. It has nothing to do with the show today, and we do need to get to the show today. I have an amazing guest, Pastor Richie Halversen. We're going to talk about his new book, Darkness Will Not Overcome. You don't want to miss this. We're going to deal with the opioid crisis in America, but let me just, I'm like a squirrel. I see something, or a crow. I see something shiny. I have to go down that path. Where do you get the word hermetically sealed? I just got to share this with you. I have strange hobbies. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm up reading, and lately I've been reading the writings of ancient Egyptian philosophers dating back 3,000 years before Christ. And there was an Egyptian sage 3,000 years before Christ. His name was Thoth. It's like saying hot sauce, hot Thoth, but you're mispronouncing it, Thoth. You'd know him, if you know Egypt at all, as the ibis-headed god of Egypt. He wasn't a god to begin with. He was just a philosopher, and everybody revered his higher wisdom, so much so that when the Greeks were ruling the world, they renamed him. They called him Hermes, the messenger god. And it was said that this philosopher was able to seal a box or chest in such a way that it could never, ever, ever be opened again except by him. Now, there was no literal chest. He's talking about secret knowledge that only the initiates, only the higher-ups would ever be able to unseal. And so hermetically sealed is named after him. If something's hermetically sealed, air cannot get in and out, contagion cannot get in or out. And this is where we actually get Gnostic beliefs. I'm going down a rabbit trail here. Hermes or Thoth was the beginning of Gnostic thinking, which made its way into Judaism in Alexandria prior to Christ, made its way into some Christian thinking in the 2nd and 3rd centuries in the city of Alexandria. Anyway, I digress. Today's show has nothing to do with Thoth. It has nothing to do with Hermes, but it does have something to do with health. It is kind of tied to the coronavirus contagion. We're going to talk today about physical and mental health. We're going to deal with what is one of the biggest health crises here in North America and particularly in the United States. Today we've got Richie Halversen in the show. He is joining me from, are you in Tennessee, Richie? Where are you today?
Yes, I am in Cleveland, Tennessee.
You're in Cleveland, Tennessee. Oh, I know where Cleveland is. You're not that far away from where my daughter resides. She's in Collegedale. And so that's not that far away, right? You're just like 15 minutes up the road.
15 minutes away, that's right.
There you go. We're all going to come and shelter in your house. I think that's the way it goes. I got a little cough, but I don't think it's anything serious. We'll
Sure.
come and live with you. Hey, you've got a brand new book. It's on Amazon. I saw it there. I have a copy in my hands. Darkness Will Not Overcome: One Person's Struggle and Recovery from Opioids. I know that everybody's mind this week is on the coronavirus, but I think this is just a big problem here in America. This has affected people that I know. They've been hurt by this, and we're going to have to take a break here in about 3 minutes because I'm so wordy. But I want to get into this book and a little bit into your story and talk about what you and your family went through, Richie. But as we're waiting for that break to come up, tell me about the coronavirus in your neck of the woods. What are you guys experiencing?
Well, I think it's pretty much what you guys are going through, a lot of the same. We have, this last weekend was our last live service probably for a couple of weeks, and so we're going to just strictly online content and practicing the social distancing and, of course, washing hands and all that stuff. And
so did you preach to an empty church this week?
No, in fact, if that had happened, I may not have shut down, but we have 2 services at our church, and I was expecting to have significantly smaller groups, but they were smaller, but we still had quite a few people, and so and you get enough people together and they don't follow the rules, and so I saw them shaking hands and hugging.
Oh no.
And so I just thought, you know what, we can't do this. So yeah.
I know it's hitting people all across the country, and maybe there's a lot of people are about to get stuck at home for days on end, especially if they get a little tickle in their throat and cough at work. It seems like this might be a good idea for Christians to be reaching out online. What else are you going to do all day? Watch Netflix all day? I think people might be interested in what believers have to say. And so so you haven't done the empty church thing yet. I think it would be odd. I don't know about you, but preaching to an empty room feels strange to me. I don't know how you're going to get used to that. So your next service, you're going to go online and preach to an empty room.
Pretty much. That's the plan. We'll see how that goes and kind of go from there. But yeah, that's the plan right now.
Well, I could get used to that, I suppose. I'm an introvert. Having an empty room might feel good. I don't know. And the funny thing is, I don't know what you're like, but I've practiced every sermon I've ever preached the day before out loud, and sometimes I'm living in a hotel, and I wonder how many sort of maids and hotel employees have come to Christ because they hear me preaching to an empty hotel room the night before I go down to a church and preach. I've had to wonder about that. And so there you go. Hey, Richie, today we're going to talk about the book. This has just come out. We're going to take a little break. Darkness Will Not Overcome. I'm looking forward to this one because you're dealing with what is really one of the biggest crises in the American health system today, and that's reliance on opioids and the dependency that some people develop, the problems that creates in their lives. So listen, you're going to want to listen to this announcement, folks, from the Voice of Prophecy. We've got some amazing things for you to do while you're in isolation. Listen to these offers. We've got Bible studies. We've got things that you can do to pass the time until they open the world back up. So grab a pen and paper, write all this stuff down, and I'll be right back with Pastor Richie Halversen.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, Does My Life Really Matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
And we are back from the break. I hope everybody not only wrote down the information they need to get our free Bible course. That really is free, folks. It is, if that's what the ad was in the break. If it wasn't, you should go to voiceofprophecy.com and get our free Bible studies. I mean, you're practicing social isolation anyway. It's time to crack open a Bible and see what God says about the world that we're living in. My guest today, Pastor Richie Halversen. Brand new book out. I know you can find this on Amazon because that's where I found it. Darkness Will Not Overcome. He's no stranger to the show. He's been on before sharing some of his story, but now that the book is out, I want you to hear from him again. Pastor Richie, tell me, why this book? Why right now?
You know, this is something I've been wanting to do ever since I was in recovery. You know, I always thought, man, I want to share this story with people. And really, as the opioid epidemic has gotten only worse and escalated since I got clean, I mean, it's always been around, but it seems to have gotten worse. We're seeing much more synthetic opioids and a lot more black market stuff coming, so that there's a lot more overdoses and things like that than ever before. And so that just kind of thrusted me into and really pushed me to go ahead and get this done. And I really wanted to share it in a way where people saw that sometimes with addiction, we think of, oh, that's those people's problem. But I wanted to share how here I came from a relatively normal, you know, that varies from place to place, but, you know, a relatively normal family.
Yeah.
And in a good atmosphere and all this, and I still got caught in that grip of addiction. And so those were some of the things that really I wanted to share.
Well, I'm glad that you did, and I can vouch for your family, by the way. I've actually known your folks for like a quarter century. They met me when I was a brand new Christian, and I can vouch, good family, and it's not just the other that gets caught up in problems. We all have something that we're dealing with. One of the things I tell people that come to me as a pastor and they say, hey, you know what, Shawn, and they're ashamed of what they're about to tell me. I've struggled with the following, and they're pretty sure they're the only ones that do struggle. And I have to tell them without naming names, look, everyone in this congregation's dealing with something, and they just hide it better than you do. You know, everybody's dealing with something. You lay out some numbers at the beginning of this book that I find really, really interesting, you know, where you delve into how serious this problem is. And, you know, I thought about this. Since picking up your book, I had a little run to the ER, and I was amazed at how quickly they handed me a bottle full of oxycodone. You know, for the first hour, I was thankful for one tablet, but I thought I threw the other 29 out. It's like, I'm okay now. I don't know that I need all of this stuff. How serious is this problem in the United States of America? How big is it? I know you address it a little bit in the book. What are we talking numbers-wise?
Yeah, I mean, it is, it's huge. I mean, we've seen just in your region, I mean, the Midwestern region saw opioid overdoses increase 70% from just 2016, just over a couple of years. We've seen them increase significantly. And so, you know, it's huge. You know, we have the overprescription of them that definitely happens. And look, I'll have a lot of people come up to me since I wrote the book and say, you know, and they kind of feel bad. You know, Pastor, I have to take some medicine. And I say, hey, that's not the issue here. There are people who have chronic pain, and they do need to take something as directed by their doctor, and they should feel no shame from that. But the reality is there are a lot of people out there that are misusing it. You know, 29% of patients that are prescribed opioids misuse opioids, and close to 15% develop an opioid use disorder. So that's pretty significant. These are people who, you know, they get on them, and you become physically dependent on them, even if you don't have the mental addiction thing going on, and it does start to cause problems. Right. In your life. So it's a huge issue. And of course now with the fentanyl and some of these things that are just, you know, coming in through the black market that people are buying on the streets. I have a lot of first responders in my church, and they say every week, every day, and this is here in Cleveland, Tennessee. Here's a kind of a suburban area. They are daily going out and dealing with overdoses and bringing people back to life, from with Narcan
Wow.
and stuff like that. And so it's really huge. It's everywhere. And this is something, and because it's not regulated, someone can take something one time and they have to take a certain amount, and then they take the same amount the next time, and it's much more potent, and it's just instant death. So it is a huge, huge problem everywhere.
Well, if I'm really, really honest, I have to admit personally, I can see the attraction and I can see where it starts. I'm a kidney stone maker. I've had 9 children at this point. I've given birth to more stones than my wife has children. And the first time, it's agony. I don't know if you've ever had a kidney stone, but I'm in agony. At first, you're afraid that you're going to die, and then you're afraid that you won't because the pain is that bad. And I remember them giving me a shot of Dilaudid finally in the hospital, and suddenly I'm warm, and the pain is gone. And it's more than just the pain relief. I suddenly felt better than I had felt, I don't know, in decades. I felt like a kid, and I thought, ooh, this is not good. I could get used to this. I mean, I'm not sure where it starts with people, but I could see, my goodness, if I weren't thinking further ahead, I would probably want more of this just because. I don't know. I don't know where it starts. But I guess it was easy for me to see this could be a problem for you, Shawn. And we've got alcoholics in the family. Everybody's got a few of those along the way, and it's easy to see how you want to medicate yourself out of the problems of this world. I guess for me, it was a bit of a wake-up call. You're not exempt, Shawn. You're not exempt at all. You liked this. And it's become a big problem. Listen, you mentioned in the book the challenges of being a PK, and I wanted to visit that a little bit because I just raised 2 PKs, and fortunately, it's turned out well. I heard my daughter; she does a podcast, and she actually came on air and said, "Oh, I liked being a PK. Worked out well." But you, in particular, come from a clan of rather well-known preachers, at least in the circles I run in. Talk a little bit about being raised as a PK, and is that a factor in what happened to you?
I think that it was. I mean, most of all, it was a good experience. I enjoyed it for the most part. When I was younger, it was just something. When I was quite a bit younger, it's something that I even wanted to do. Wanted to be a pastor. Of course, it was like, you just wanted to do what your dad was doing. But as I got older, it got to the point where when I got into high school, it got to the place where it was not as exciting. It was not something that I wanted to do. There were elements of being a pastor's kid. There was a certain level of expectation, and you kind of have to live in this glass bowl, and where people have a certain expectation of you, and some of those things. And as I brought out in the book, I was kind of going through that period of time where I was starting to kind of get to the point where I didn't enjoy that. I didn't really want that identity to be thrusted onto me, and kind of wanted to experience life in a total different identity. So I would say it was mostly a great experience.
Yeah.
But it's still, there was probably a point where I had grown to just kind of resent the fact that I had to kind of feel like I had to respond to a certain expectation because of who my family was and what people's expectations were on me, and I wanted to experience something completely different.
Yeah, I've often thought about that. It's not fair for PKs. They grow up with everybody looking at them in a different set of expectations, and they don't get to live out their childhood or their youths in private like most people. Everybody's watching. Everybody's got an opinion. How do you move from, growing up in this preacher family, and you come from good folks, and what's the path to the opioid addiction? Where did this start for you? What was the first sort of dalliance with it? Where did it become a problem? How did you know it was becoming a problem? That kind of stuff. Tell me, what was the entrance into that world?
So it started probably the way most of the story of addiction started. I mean, it was something that in my middle to end last 2 years of high school started getting into kind of that party scene and kind of getting in with the wrong group of people, and just started hanging out, and and it goes from drinking to smoking to just kind of goofing off and doing it to be stupid and doing it because it's what everybody else is doing, and then it transitions into that point where, like you were saying, man, I enjoy this a little too much, and
Right.
then a weekend becomes every other day, becomes every day, becomes throughout the day, and so that's kind of what it became. It was just a real big, especially the last 2 years of high school, it was kind of a big party. My parents actually were doing full-time evangelism, traveling all over the world, and so I would be at home or go home a lot and be alone and with friends and stuff like that, and so it just kind of was a recipe for disaster for that time period and where I was at in my life. And it just kind of snowballed from there. Then, of course, 6 months after high school, and here my wife and my girlfriend at the time, were getting ready to have our first child. And so all these things, rather than kind of rising to the
Right.
responsibility and the occasion, I used the substances as a way to kind of escape that responsibility and self-medicate.
Yeah, and I think there's self-medicate's a big deal. I mean, somebody's listening today and opioids aren't your thing, alcohol's not your thing, but there's a pretty good chance you're self-medicating with something, whether it's, eating or escapism of some sort, movies, entertainment. We all medicate somehow, and sometimes it's completely inappropriate. I know we're going to have to take a break here, Richie. When we come back, I want to ask you, at what point do you realize that it is a problem and you just keep... I mean, for me, before Christ, alcohol was a thing, and I was drinking 4 or 5 nights a week, and one day I walked into a bar by myself, and I sat down, and I had a drink by myself, and I sat there thinking, you've heard about this your whole life. The minute you're drinking alone, you probably have a problem. And I remember that moment well. When we come back from the break, I'm going to ask you, at what point do you realize that you've gone beyond the party scene and that this is a problem, and maybe you don't care at that point? I don't know. I know there comes that point for everybody. You realize that you're not driving anymore. And so what we're going to do is take a little break. I'm with Pastor Richie Halversen. Darkness will not overcome: one person's struggle and recovery from opioids. You can find it on Amazon. It's Halversen, Halversen, a stunning new book, and I think one of the most important books that you will read this year. If you are struggling, or someone you know is struggling with addiction, get yourself a copy of this thing. I'm going to take a little break. Those of you who are holed up because of coronavirus, you're going to want to take advantage of these offers from the good people at the Voice of Prophecy. I mean, you've got all day to kill if you're holed up in your house. Why not learn the Bible back and front? We can help you with that. So write down this information, and I'll be right back.
Disclosure is just one of the programs brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy, like the audio adventure program Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a weekly Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy faith-building stories with Jake Donovan, Mr. Simon, and others in this small mountain town. Each summer, campers visit Discovery Mountain, where they sing songs, learn about God, and reenact a Bible story with the help of drama teachers Miss Wendy and Miss Tamra. With 24 full episodes every year and programming every week, your family will have something uplifting to listen to every week. Listen to episodes on demand and watch video features from Director Doug at discoverymountain.com or on your favorite podcast platform. That's discoverymountain.com.
We are back from the break. I hope you all ran out again and washed your hands for 20 seconds. You've got to sing the happy birthday song to make it effective. And I sing it really slowly, and I sing poorly, so I have to close the bathroom door when I'm doing it so my family doesn't rebel against my tune. But do take care of yourself. Follow the recommendations that are going out there. You might not be at high risk. You know, they say 98% of us are going to be just fine. But there's someone in your life that wouldn't be just fine, so do follow the recommendations. It's probably better that we're all laughing about how careful we were 6 months from now than the opposite. So take care of yourselves out there. Have faith in God. And ride this out. All right, listen, my guest today, Richie Halversen, Darkness Will Not Overcome. It's the story of his addiction to opioids. Brand new book, and whatever your addiction is or your family members' addictions are, you want to get a copy of this and sort of look at his story. Before the break, Richie, I was saying, look, you know, what was the path in? High school, partying. I think a lot of us can identify with that phase of life. Tell me about at what point do you realize you have a problem, and what's the path like after you end up introducing these substances into your life?
Yeah, so, you know, there were several different moments. You have these little moments where you realize, okay, there's definitely a problem, and this is more than just using recreationally. And so I had several of those. You know, you'll hit a bottom, and then your bottom falls out. And, you know, my bottoms had bottoms.
Oh, wow.
And so, you know, you had all these different things that would happen. You know, first it was, you know, using alone. You know, before it was just to be sociable and because everybody else was doing it. And then you find yourself more and more alone.
Right.
Using it, and then you start getting illegal drugs and experimenting with those, and then from there, and it continues. And you know, for me, it was probably the biggest moment where I realized, okay, this has crossed a serious line. Is when I crossed over into, you know, getting drugs illegally, and then also getting prescription drugs illegally. You know, that's kind of what's interesting, is often the street drugs, you know, we kind of put that as, oh, that's bad, but then the prescription drugs, that's okay. But in reality, in my life, the prescription drugs beat me up and messed me up more than the street drugs did. They both will, but you know, I just kept going down that downward spiral, and it kept getting worse and worse. So
you kept searching for new ways to get the stuff too. If I'm reading the book right, you know, it's a doctor's not going to write you a prescription. You ended up going after them fraudulently, didn't you?
Yeah, so in the beginning, you do what we call doctor shop, or, you know, I would go from doctor's office to dentist's office to emergency room, and sometimes I would go to 4 doctors, dentist, emergency rooms a day, you know, because as that tolerance gets stronger and stronger, you have to take more and more, and then it got to the point where I just couldn't see. And then you get into this point of desperation where you do things that are absolutely insane that you never would have done if you were in your right mind.
Yeah, there's one story in the book, and folks, you got to get this book and read it. It deals with the dentist, and I admitted to you in the break that I'm sorry, I've got a little bit of a warped sense of humor. I did smile, sometimes even in pain. There's something to smile at, but talk about what you were willing to do with the dentist.
Yeah, you know, that was after one of those full 2 days of trying to get drugs and hit a lot of dead ends. Some days you'd go out and you'd do well, and then some days, you know, it was a full-time job of desperation. You know, it just really was 24/7. And you know, I had been away from home for almost 2 days. Of course, my marriage and everything was in a really rough patch there, and I knew I needed to come back home, or else I wasn't going to have a home to come back to. And I was kind of at the end of my rope, and just did not, already going through withdrawals, you know, which is never any fun. You know, think of the flu times 10,
right,
and you've got opioid withdrawal. And so, you know, you're going through that. I'm at a dentist, and this guy sees through my charade. I mean, he definitely does, and most doctors do. A lot of doctors do. They either ignore it, or they, you know, just try to get you out of there as soon as they can. But he kind of saw through it, and he kind of called me on it a little bit on my bluff. And basically, I knew if the only way I was going to be getting any drugs is if he.
So you're faking it. You're
extracted.
faking tooth pain or jaw
Oh
pain.
yeah. I'm faking tooth pain. I know what to say because this is over doing this for, a year or two, you know what to say, you know what to not say. And so, yeah, just faking the tooth pain. And then, he basically said that, the only thing he could do was extract it. I was used to the dentist saying, well, here's some antibiotics and here's
Right.
some painkiller, and then we'll have you come back in, and then we'll do a root canal or something like that. And this guy wasn't going there, so he just said, well, I can pull it. And so I was at the point where I was so tired, I just said, okay, pull it.
Oh,
and
no.
So he did, and they pulled my tooth. He gave me probably, I don't know, maybe he gave me 10 pills or something like that, and it wasn't even, it wasn't even what I was going for. It was some lower, it was crazy. And just really, that was one of those moments where I'm going back home and thinking, this is absolutely insane, and I need some serious help, and something's got to give.
Yeah, and I'm sorry I laughed at that. But it's like you were willing to have. It tells a story that you're willing to have your tooth pulled for no good reason just to keep the charade going. And that's the thing that I find mind-boggling. You also write in one point, and I'm going to quote the book here. You keep going after that first high, but you can't ever find it. Unpack that idea for us a little bit.
Yeah, so, with the disease of addiction, and some people struggle with that concept, but it really is the way that we have to treat this, is that it is a disease. It is a mental, physical, and spiritual disease. And the reality is the way that manifests itself. If you struggle with the disease of addiction, there is that moment where you use for the first time, or one of those times early on,
Mm-hmm.
and it seems to complete you in a sense. It makes you feel the way that you feel like I should feel all the time. And whereas some people hate that feeling, of being out of control, and the feeling of that the opioids give, some of us feel like, okay, now I feel normal. And, that's what it seems to be, that you just keep chasing after. Is it really did its job? In the beginning, the drugs work, they do it so well, you keep using them.
Right.
And the problem with that is the more you use, the more you have to use. And as we say in recovery, in the beginning, you use the drugs. In the end, the drugs use you. And that's really how it works. And you keep chasing that. And you just can't ever find it again. And you realize there's not enough drugs in the universe to supply what it is you're looking for.
Let me ask this, Richie, as you're doing this, I mean, the book has some incredible stories. I wish we had time for them all. I think people just need to get the book. I mean, you're going into restaurants with your children, you're asking for money, for gas, ostensibly, but really you need more drug funds, and you're getting debt. But is there ever a point where you're lying to people and the lies bother you? You hate yourself for living duplicitously? I guess that's the word, yeah.
Yeah. In the beginning, yeah, definitely. Always during the time, there's part of me that's thinking, oh man, I never thought I'd be this guy. But, the drugs at that point, they have the power over you. They have the control. And so you are really caught in that grip of powerlessness. And they are the ones that are calling the shots. The drugs are. So you do things that you never thought you'd ever end up doing. Asking for money, lying to family, lying to other people to get more money. I never thought I'd be one of the people who went in and made up some story of, why I needed money for drugs, and then use my kids as a prop in the lie, to try to evoke their compassions on me. But there's always a down deep, you got to push it down deep or else you couldn't survive. But yeah, deep down, there's this part of you that just, it hurts, and you're like, I can't believe that I'm doing this.
I think that one of the most serious things about this is not only are you a victim, but this has a decided effect. You've already mentioned your family, your marriage, your kids. How does it victimize everybody else in your life?
Yeah, that's the thing. Addiction does not just affect the addict, it affects everybody else. It's a family disease, is what we say, because it affects everybody. And in fact, the family members will start to relate to life differently because of the addict in their life. And so the issues of paranoia and dishonesty, they're not lying to get drugs, they're lying to cover for the addict that's in their family. They're struggling with denial, not so that they can go use, but they're embracing denial because the truth is much harder to believe in. And so they would rather believe in a lie than the reality and to face the truth. And so in almost the same ways that the addict is affected, it affects the family member. And they fall into some of those same patterns, and they need recovery. They need recovery in a support group as much as the addict does.
You mentioned that in this entire process, I mean, the family's affected. You're having to bury your own lies deeper and deeper to quiet your conscience. You mentioned that you avoided church as much as possible through those times. Why was that? What was going on? Why do you think that church was something you didn't want to confront?
There were a couple things going on there. One was just the practical side of, as I had shared before, is everything was laid at the altar of my drug use, so all of my time, all of my energies, all of my passion was invested in the drug, so I didn't have time for church. That was probably one of the biggest issues. But then the secondary one was just I knew I wasn't where I needed to be, and I knew people could see it. I felt like a fraud. I felt like a joke, and just struggling with those feelings. I didn't want to go to a place where I felt like, man, I might be exposed and called to answer for some of those decisions that I had made.
Well, here's what I find is the good news, and we have one segment to go yet today, and I want to get to this, is that today your life is radically different. You are free from that addiction. Your family is back together. You're a pastor. You're preaching. You're leading people to Christ. And I want to talk a little bit because, just to talk about a problem, it doesn't help anybody. And there are millions of people listening who have problems a lot like the one that you faced in your family. And I want to spend some time talking about the cure because you did find a way out, and there was a path out of this addiction and into a much better life, and I want to hold out that hope. I know we're going to have to take a break, Richie, so I can hear them starting to cue the music. That tells me it's time to stop talking for just a moment. Please do get a pen and paper. There are solutions to most of the problems you face, or at least you can find some hope. And we have amazing resources at the Voice of Prophecy that, honest and for true, they're free to you. Others have made them possible. Generous donations to this ministry have made sure that you can have access to some of the resources that might help turn your life around. We've been teaching the Bible and letting people study the Bible with the best of tools, well, basically since the 1920s, in particular since the 1940s. Write this down and we'll be right back.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions? Like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Does my life really matter to God? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers that you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter the most to you. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
We are back from the break. I'm sitting down with Pastor Richie Halversen, but virtually. We're all practicing social distancing. I'm in Colorado. He's in Tennessee. But thanks to the miracle of technology, we're together in studio today talking about his new book, Darkness Will Not Overcome. You can find a copy on Amazon. I highly recommend that you get yourself a copy because even if you aren't facing an addiction problem, somebody you know is. I guarantee it. And this is a powerful story. We've identified the problem in the last segments. We've got one segment to go, Pastor Halversen. Tell us your story. What was the way back out? What was the bottom like? How did you find your way back out? What is God's role in all of this?
Absolutely. So I had been to treatment quite a few times during that journey. Went to treatment the last time. And, that's the thing. Sometimes people will ask me, well, what treatment center did you go to? As though that treatment center had the magic wand fix. And really, there is no treatment center like that. The only thing that made that treatment center work for me was I was finally ready to stop the vicious cycle and surrender to God. And that's the key. Treatment centers can kind of dust us off and get us clean. They can't keep us clean. And so when I left the treatment center, came back home, I'd been praying the whole way back that my wife would be there to pick me up. Because I left, when I left, things were very rocky. My wife was always supportive, overly supportive of me and there for me. But of course, because of my choices, it had gotten to the place where she had to put up some major boundaries and things like this. And so she was there to pick me up. And so, having a supportive family that didn't enable me, which means they didn't give me money when I asked for the money. They didn't fall to the lies and the manipulation. In the beginning they did, but then they learned and they stopped doing that and started giving me that tough love. Richie, I'm not going to bail you out of jail this time. I'm not going to give you money. I'm not going to let you do this to yourself anymore.
Right. There was actually a powerful point.
That's when it started hitting home.
Yeah, there's a powerful point in the book where your folks, you're in jail. You've been arrested for, I think it was prescription fraud at that point, and nobody bailed you out. And I think that people wrestle with that, don't they? Because, when somebody I love's in trouble, I want to bail them out, even if I know they did it to themselves. But I guess there comes a point where the best thing to happen is let somebody find bottom. I don't know. Am I wrong?
That's right. That's what we say in the 12-step recovery is that, when we do that, when we enable people, we steal their bottoms from them. And we see a lot of people in the rooms loved to death by their family because their family's not willing to give them that tough love. And so that was something that was huge in my journey back. I realized I had hit my bottom. And I had a family there ready to help me make those tough decisions. Got back. First thing I did was went to a 12-step meeting. In treatment, they'll drive that home, the importance of 12-step recovery and the need for daily. If we used every day, then we can't think that we can get clean from just going to a meeting or to church once a week.
Right.
If we used every day, we're going to need recovery every day. And so I started going to meetings. I did 90 meetings in 90 days and started doing that and started going back to church, started praying again, started opening myself up to God working in my life. And, before long I was able to start work again and things like this. And so you take it one day at a time, but slowly God starts putting the people in your life that you need. He starts putting where you need to go, and the pieces started falling together.
I found one fascinating concept in this book. I underlined it in my copy. It's your mom praying, and she's praying for you, and you use this phrase, a Christian was becoming a daughter. What did you mean by that?
My mom, in the beginning, she talks about her prayer life as far as, praying for me. And often when I talk to her after this experience, before my addiction, she thought she had a prayer life.
Right.
After my addiction, she knew she had a prayer life, and she learned to go to God in a way as a child goes to their parent. Only a child, there's a famous author who makes the statement that only a child will wake up a king in the middle of the night for a drink of water. And that is the kind of access that we have to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords.
That's a very powerful concept, isn't it? We're tempted sometimes, okay, everybody learned to pray, so obviously this was all God's will. I think we need to be careful about that. It wasn't God's will that you hurt and your family hurts and the addiction happens. But I think of that, God works all things together for good. It doesn't mean the ingredients are good. It might all be our fault. I had a preacher one time tell me, look, cake is delicious, but the ingredients, have you ever taken a tablespoon of cocoa powder? You'll gag. So God takes our mess and makes something good out of it at the end. He can redeem everything, give back the years the locusts have eaten. But that doesn't mean that any of it was his fault or his will along the way. And this idea that a child can wake up a king for a drink of water, man, that's powerful. And I guess you just given me a new frame of reference for my prayers. This is my Heavenly Father, and your Heavenly Father was your path out, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was definitely. And I think, the key, especially if we grew up in the church, and this is another reason why I wrote the book and why I've integrated this into my ministry. So much of what I learned from 12-step recovery, I've integrated into my ministry because there's a lot that they're doing that the church could learn from. And I think that, as Christians, we can run the risk of thinking, well, man, I should be able to pray this away. I should be able to have faith enough that this doesn't happen. It shouldn't be happening to me. And we tend to think this way.
Right.
But the reality is that's a very dangerous. Yes, I have met people who prayed and God took the desire away overnight and they never picked it up again. That can happen, but most cases it doesn't. And it requires a fellowship of people going through a similar thing to help you in this process, who can call you on the dishonesty, who can spot it, and can really give you that tough love that you need. And the 12 steps really breaks down, though, that faith, that we have to step out in faith aspect in a real relatable way that's hard to manipulate. And so it's something very important. So as Christians, don't fall into the trap of thinking, oh, well, I should be able to just go to church. That should take care of me. Often, most of our churches are not set up to deal with the intricacies and the real detailed dishonesty and denial and manipulation that exists within addiction. And so we need additional help. And no one should feel shame or guilt for getting some of that additional help. People are specialized to help that sort of thing. I never could have done it without 12-step recovery. That's really what I attest. And God worked through that to reach me. I was 2 years clean before I really started going back to church.
Right.
And as far as the church that I had grown up in, and so that's important for us to kind of keep in mind, that we need that.
Richie, somebody's listening and they say, look, this is for somebody else. I don't have a pharmaceutical addiction. I barely take aspirin when I have a fever. So this is about somebody else. How would a book like this one, your story, apply to everybody who's listening right now?
Well, I can't remember the exact statistic, but 95%, something like that, of every person, we have an addict in our family, or we know of an addict, or we're close friends with an addict. So this book's going to help, educate us on the disease of addiction and how we can help people who struggle with it. It's going to help churches. It's going to help those become more recovery-oriented and help people who are struggling with addiction and give them a tool. But it also, I believe, has a personal application to everyone. It may not be drug addiction. It may be sexual addiction. It may be an addiction to pornography. It might be an addiction to spending money. Whatever we get our identity from, whether it's the car we drive or it's how big our house is or our square footage, whatever, maybe it's even in our morality and our good works. Some of us get our identity from the fact that, I've never done anything bad and therefore, I'm special, I'm someone. We all have that identity. And the reality is, unless we find our identity in Christ, we will never be satisfied. We'll never be good enough, smart enough, fast enough. There's always someone who's smarter. There's always someone who's richer. And, unless we find our identity in Christ, we're never satisfied. And that's ultimately what my story is I looked for satisfaction in everything else, and I only found it in Christ. And that's a story that we can all relate to, I believe.
Yeah, we can. And I know everybody listening has got an addiction to something. Some people are addicted to anger, outrage. I mean, we seem to live in an outrage culture now, and you seem to get your next hit over the next thing you're angry about. Worry.
Yes.
There's one for me. You know, I love waking up in the middle of the night and sorting out all my problems, worrying myself down to 3 hours sleep a night. Entertainment. Some people numb themselves to the realities of life by Netflix all weekend. You might not have a pharmaceutical problem, but you've got something that you're trying to build your identity on. Here's the problem. There's only one thing in this universe that lasts. That's the kingdom of Christ. Everything else is going to pass away. And if you've built who you are on anything else, you're going to run into trouble. You're going to hit a dead end at some point. Richie, this is a powerful story. We've got just a few minutes left before the end of the show. What do you want to say to somebody who's out there that maybe they've hit bottom or maybe they're not quite there yet? What would you say to that person who this show caught their ear because they know there's a problem? What do you want to tell them?
You know, I was about a year clean. I went up to my sponsor of the time, and, you know, you hear this a lot. I hit bottom, and I had heard that so many times, and I was worried I had not hit my bottom. So I went up to my sponsor and I said, how do I know if I've hit my bottom or not? Yeah. And I'll never forget, he looks at me and he said, Richie, your bottom happens when you stop digging and you put the shovel down and you surrender. Your bottom can happen at any time. And I think that's the biggest thing, that if you're struggling with addiction, whatever it may be, it doesn't have to be this way. There is victory in Christ. There is freedom that can happen. And your bottom can take place whenever you're ready to put down the shovel and surrender to His way. And so that's what I would encourage people. There is hope. There is help. Go out and find it. Because this life is so much better than the life I was living before.
Yeah, would it be fair to say, I know we only have seconds left, but, we choose our way into these problems. It's not willpower that gets you out. It's the grace of God, but you do have to choose the moment when you decide you're going to get help, don't you? I mean, don't you also, in a way, choose your way back out?
You have to cooperate with God's grace. Definitely, He came, He found me, He picked me up, He turned me around, but I have to be willing to step out and cooperate with Him. Faith without works is dead, and that's where we really find the freedom, is when we take what He says and we apply it to our lives.
Richie, I'm so glad you took a few moments there in Cleveland, Tennessee, as we're all practicing social distancing and holding up in the virus apocalypse. Thanks for sharing with us. I know people are going to find hope, and darkness will not overcome. It's the new book from Pastor Richie Halversen, One Person's Struggle and Recovery from Opioids. You want to get a copy of this. I'm not sure what you're struggling with. I'll tell you this, though. God knows what you're struggling with. He hasn't missed one episode of your life, and He's waiting for you to say, you know what, I want to choose my way back out. I need your help because I can't do this on my own willpower. And you can choose that this is your bottom today. You want to get a copy of the book. Again, Darkness Will Not Overcome by Pastor Richie Halversen. You can find it on Amazon. Until next time, you've been listening to Disclosure. I'm Shawn Boonstra. God bless.